And one thing I will ask, because our speakers are going to be speaking kind of together in sequence, but also together. So I'm not going to spotlight them. So you might want to turn your system onto the speaker mode, which you can find in the upper, I'm sure most of you know this, but you can find it in the upper right-hand corner of your screen when it says view, and just select speaker. That way, the person who is speaking will be on at the time that they are actually speaking. All right, I think I've covered all the nuts and bolts of our presentation. Let's get on with it. This is very exciting. We have two terrific people with us this evening. We have Dr. David Coulier, directs the Joseph L. Brechner Freedom of Information Project, which has focused on research and education and freedom of information since 1977. He is a former journalist, taught data journalism and access to public records at the University of Arizona for 17 years, and is former president of the National Freedom of Information Coalition and Society of Professional Journalists. He is a co-author of The Art of Access, Strategies for Acquiring Public Records, has testified 3 times before Congress regarding FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, of course, we all know what that is, and serves on the U.S. Freedom of Information Act Advisory Committee. Welcome, Dr. Coulier. Deborah Fisher, who's a longtime friend of the League of Women Voters of Tennessee, by the way, is executive director of Tennessee Coalition for Open Government, commonly referred to as TCOG, a nonprofit organization devoted to promoting and preserving access to government records and meetings through the state's public records and open meeting laws. She has held that position since November 2013. Fisher also is the director of the John, and I hope I get this right, Siegenthaler?
Siegenthaler.
Oh, not even close. Thank you. Excellence in First Amendment Studies at Middle Tennessee State University, where she manages the online First Amendment encyclopedia with over 20,000 users a day. Wow.
Yeah.
Develops First Amendment programs for students and teaches an editing class. Prior to these 2 positions, she spent 25 years as a journalist and senior news editor, including 10 years at the Tennessean, where she was senior editor for news. And that's just a little bit of what these 2 fine people have been doing. And they have an exciting and interesting program for us. And again, we'll hold all our questions to the end. And so I believe, Dr. Coulier, may we call you David?
Sure, Dave's fine.
All right. Start us off, please. And if you have any issue with your presentation, just pen it over to me and I have it set up on my desktop.
Great. Yeah, thanks. And thanks for everybody turning out. Wow, what a great showing. Thanks for doing this. Obviously, you care about good government, right? And civic engagement. And that's what this is all about. I put in the chat a handout that 76 pages long. But has references to all sorts of resources that you might find handy and things I'll talk about. It is geared a little toward journalists, so I need to make more of a broad-based version. I'm working on that, but the resources are just as good. And I could at the end provide the slides that I'm going to show, as well as a PDF in the chat. So if I go through really quick, which I will, you don't have to worry about missing something. And then, I just forgot, y'all are probably interested in elections, right? Some of you into that, maybe? Well, this is the season, and I do have some handouts I could provide about that and talk a little bit about some research we're doing regarding the effects of vexatious requests on county election offices around the country. So we can talk about that if you think that interests you. So let me go ahead and share my screen and kind of get going. Then we'll get through this and leave a lot of time for questions and discussion and thoughts you have, because I figure I can learn a lot more from you than anything. So I'm looking forward to this. There's our contact information, and we'll provide that at the end as well and in these slides. So if you want to reach out later, you're more than happy to just email me, let me know, and I love to chat about this stuff. So of course, what we're talking about is democracy, about how in our country we're in charge, right? I mean, that's kind of the whole concept. We get to run the show instead of a king. And to do that, we kind of have to know what's going on. And it's the way to make things work a little better in society. And so really, we're reliant in the US on public record laws, statutes. There is no actually constitutional right to know in the US. It's not in the US Constitution. A few 6 states have it in their constitutions, but for the most part, it's statutory. And these laws, as in Tennessee, provide people the right to look at what the government's up to. And the presumption is generally that everything's open for us to see that the government possesses or creates, unless there's a law that says it can be kept secret. Of course, Tennessee's record law has been around longer than federal FOIA, Federal Freedom of Information Act. In fact, a lot of states had these laws far before the feds. I think it was Massachusetts who had one in 1860s. So this isn't a new concept. In fact, Sweden had one in 1766, even before we were a country. So this has been around for a little while. They do have their issues, though. They're not perfect. They do have some serious, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. There's a lot of research out there, and we do a lot of research at Brechner, and so I scour the field, and there are a lot of studies out there that show these laws reduce corruption, right, all around the world. They do make a difference. There's one study that shows they lead to cleaner drinking water, and that's really important. They lead to safer restaurants, and we won't get botulism because restaurants are on their toes. This stuff's out there for people to see. Sex offenders are less likely to reoffend, so it keeps us safer. Parents are enabled to choose better schools for their kids, school choice, because they can see how the schools are doing. And in fact, for every dollar spent on public records journalism, society benefits $287. That's a huge return on investment. We're talking saved lives, lower taxes, all sorts of benefits. These are material benefits to all of us. And so it actually matters. And of course, it's about holding our government accountable as well. Those in charge, the politicians, the elected officials, the folks running our city halls or mosquito control districts, you name it, they're beholden to us. And without that, then bad things can happen, as we've seen all around the world and in history, right? And we don't want to go down that path. But we are. And this is disconcerting to me. All our research is showing, we've been tracking this for a number of years, and through a variety of means. And what we're seeing is it's getting harder and harder to get information that we're entitled to from the government. The federal level, 10 years ago, on average, if you ask for a record, you get it about half the time. And now it's down to 13% of the time. Look at that trend line. What happens when it gets to zero? How long is that far away from here? That's kind of scary. You'd think, well, the U.S. is amazing. We're exceptional. We're a beacon of democracy. But 140 nations have these laws, and there's a site that ranks them, the strength of the law, the ability for people to get information they're entitled to. 140 nations. Where do you think is the top nation? Afghanistan, if you can believe it. And those are the top 10 right there. It's kind of weird. You think Afghanistan, if I went and asked the Taliban for some emails, I don't think I'm going to get a warm reception. So just because we have a good law, and Afghanistan has the strongest law in the world, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. We need more than just statutes. We need political culture that cares about this. We need people who care about this, because if people don't buy into it, then it's just a piece of paper. By the way, Anybody guess where the US ranks out of 140? Any guesses? Yeah. Feel free to put in the chat if you have any guesses on what country where we rank. 57th. That's a pretty good guess. Any others want to throw them in the chat? 100th? Okay. Okay. Well, all those are in the ballpark. 40th? We're talking about 78th. So not exceptional. It's kind of weird, like Rwanda's better than us, Russia's better than us, and etc. And of course, that's just kind of shows that just because you have a law doesn't mean you have a good system. We have to move beyond that. At the local level, we're also seeing this trend that we see at the federal level. Now, it's not as bad. To be honest, we all know that it's easier to get records at the state and local level than it is at the federal level. Journalists all know this. They avoid federal agencies if they can because it's just a nightmare often. But even then, we're seeing this trend at the state level, and it varies by state. So I've taken a look at compliance around the country by state, and it goes from anywhere like Washington State, where 70% of the time you get what you asked for, down to Alabama, where 13%, 12%, 10% of the time you get what you asked for. Tennessee doesn't rank that well in this data set. So something's going on. In fact, if you look at a map, you can kind of see something's going on in a region of the country. The dark red area is the most secretive states in the country, including Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and we don't know why that is exactly. It might be political culture. It might be, I don't know. There's conjecture why, and we're still studying this and figuring out. It could be just people thinking, why are you so nosy? Know your place. I don't know. But something we're looking into. And great question in the chat. How's Tennessee number changed over the years? I'd have to look at that. I haven't looked at that specifically. It's a good number. For the most part, when I have glanced around the states, they pretty much follow the trend line. And I think Deborah can talk to that in a few moments about what she's seeing in the state. I think she's the expert. She'd know this better than anybody. When we look at other studies that other organizations have done rating the states, Tennessee also doesn't really rate that well on a whole number of different studies that have looked at different kinds of elements of transparency. And so that's a little disconcerting as well. It's not just our data at Brechner, but it's a lot. So something's going on in Tennessee. And I think everybody should be aware of that, including the lawmakers. I think they need to be aware of, and every citizen out there. It's your state, it's your government, and I think people would want to expect better, right? And so, Deborah, fill us in. Thanks, Kathy Carlson, for teeing this up. But Deborah, what are you seeing in Tennessee? And we see some improvements that have occurred in the past year, and then we'll talk about what needs to happen more. So take it away, please.
So TCOG is 20 years old. We turned 20 last year. And when we kind of came up with a blurb to put on our website about what was most important to us, it was to preserve the public records law. And I think that's because every year in the past 20 years, there have been new bills that have closed records or maybe made it difficult to get records. And so a lot of what we have tried to do is to push back on that and to show the public why access to public records should be preserved. And but we also have tried to be proactive because about 4 or 5 years ago, we really started to push harder in the legislature for changes in the law. And some of them have been small. They've dealt with a specific issue, but some of them have been big. For example, just some successes that we have had is the agenda law. So, in many states, a governing body is required to have an agenda. You might think it's part of the adequate notice of a meeting, but it's not in Tennessee. The courts have ruled that that's not part of adequate notice. So, we were able 2 years ago to introduce and get passed an agenda law which requires a governing body to have it available 48 hours in advance, and most importantly, that it reasonably describe the matters to be deliberated or acted upon. We expanded it last year. We hope to go back in and keep expanding it. And so far, that has been, I think, successful. We need to see how it is working out because there is a provision in there that if a governing body follows its rules or procedures, it can add things to the agenda during a meeting. And we are starting to hear stories about usually that's like a majority vote, but in some cases, like in Chattanooga, really the county mayor just says, I want to add this to agenda and he can. So we feel like that was a good advance and we got lots of support for that. But we also know that sometimes the forces that want to keep things secret from the public, in fact, who think that if the public knows this, it won't be good. Not just not good for us, but they won't understand it. They won't understand, why we want to give $30 million in this economic development project. So we don't want that information to be public. And I've always taken issue with that. I think the public is a lot smarter than the people who say we won't get it. We can't tell you because, the truth is too difficult to hear, but the public needs to hear it. So, anyway, agendas, that's one thing we've been able to get public comment periods. Nothing in state law required a public comment period. This became important. It's now in statute. There was some move to electronic meetings. The only governing bodies allowed to really have full electronic meetings are state meetings, state boards, and some of you might be quite interested in some of these state boards. I know you probably follow the election commission. Debbie, I'm trying to think of that, but they're definitely boards that you follow. If they have an electronic meeting, they have to record it and they have to have it available on their website. I will say one thing about when I say clarity over fees. If there is one thing that, and TCOG, by the way, is just a coalition of people. I happen to be their executive director, but it is a lot of people. It is news media. It is good government groups like the League of Women Voters. It reaches across different aisles. The Beacon Center has, is a member of TCOG. It's attorneys. And one thing that this coalition of people have been able to maintain in our law that a lot of states don't have is an option to be able to look at public records for free, no matter if someone has to spend 50 hours, 5 hours redacting those records or making copies of those records. And, I probably didn't appreciate that when I first came into this job as much as I do now. And I've seen what happens at the local level where someone says, that'll cost you $1,000, that'll cost you $800. And you can change your request to just inspect the records. And you can go in there, you can take your computer, you can write down anything. You can say, I want this one piece of paper, but I don't want all 100 pieces of paper, and you get a lower cost. So we have really fought hard to maintain that ability to basically not have a poll tax on being able to know what your government is doing in public records. And the league has helped us on this. We've had hearings around the state. And so I think our law, I don't know it's completely unique. There may be a few states who have this, but our law, we've not gone into the same territory that some states have where there's like, oh, you can charge $35 an hour, and the next year it's $45 an hour, and the next year it's $55 an hour. So while the state can set how much they charge an hour based on who compiles the records, we still have this free option. And in our mind, that makes it so that anybody, and it's also important I spend a lot of time every day talking to journalists. We have a helpline. I talk to citizens and journalists, but to be truthful, I talk to a lot more journalists. And you have these small newspapers, small news organizations, or a TV station, and they need that free access. They can't be spending $800 every time they want to get a personnel file of a police officer, right? So anyway, that has been a good thing in our law. We were able to get into our law actually an attorney fee provision if someone violates the open meetings lawsuit. It's the same as in the public records law, where there has to be a willful finding, meaning the governing body knew what they were doing was wrong and did it anyway. And I also want to point out to the Office of Open Records, which has evolved since 2008 when it was formed. The Office of Open Records was an initiative of TCOG before my time, before I was here. Frank Gibson, if you guys have known that name, but he was the executive director and the founding executive director. But that is an office that I would say right now, as compared to some of the previous years, has been more on the side of open government than in the past. I've seen many letters they have written to citizens and journalists that they have been able to give to governing government entities who are trying to charge them money or delay their request. And right now, it's a pretty strong office for us. They don't have enforcement power, but if they write a letter, that's going to have some sway on the governing body or the government entity who's kind of resisting access. So those are some things, not everything. We've done a lot of small tweaks as well, but these are some things that we have improved. And I know it says 23, 24, maybe it goes back a little bit farther than that, but that we've improved in the law. And there is more to do. Maybe that's the next slide, or maybe it's later. I'm not sure, David. I can't. Oh, what we need. Okay. We need to continue to protect free inspection. A bill comes every 3 years. I think, that we got to get rid of free inspection. That would be the end of the Tennessee Public Records Law, because there's no limit on how much could be charged and how many hours they can say that it takes to put something together. You'd be going to court on everything. And you can't go to court. We don't want that system where we have to go to court to get access to public records. However, we do need better enforcement. And I think the biggest difference between Tennessee and the states that rank really high on compliance with the public records law is that they have in their law, if the citizen asks for a record, they get denied, or the governing body doesn't follow the law in terms of when they give it to you or whatever. If the citizen files a lawsuit, and a lawsuit's going to be $30,000-$40,000, it just is, and they file a lawsuit and they prevail, then in some states, David will know exactly how many, it is a mandatory attorney fee. The citizen gets their attorney fees reimbursed if they prevail. And that provision is a stick. We talked about carrots and sticks. A carrot's good. We're carrot in Tennessee. I'm all about carrots. But this is a stick, and at some point we're going to have this stick, and it will be hard to get the legislature to pass that, because I go up there, and Debbie knows this, there's us, maybe me, maybe the League of Women Voters, a few other people. Well, you know how many government associations there are? About 60. And then, including every single agency that has a liaison, a state agency that has a liaison, they're all opposed. And so it is tough. But if we can make this happen, I do believe that we won't have the runaround because it's a stick, it's more than the carrot. Okay. So we also need a requirement that when they deny the records, that they have to be specific. They can't just say, well, here's a general, we don't do it. They need to be more specific. I was just in Memphis yesterday. I did workshops for the Daily Memphian. I don't know is anybody here from Memphis? No, I can't see everybody, so maybe you are. But and also for the Commercial Appeal, the reporters. Well, their problem is every 30 days they get another automated email from the city of Memphis automated portal for public records requests saying it'll be another 30 days. We're still reviewing. We're still reviewing. And to the extent that, I mean, this can go on for years. It's been well documented in Memphis. Memphis is not alone. It's just that they've well documented it. We need penalties for that kind of ruling delay because judges, we need to make that clear that that's not right. And we also need, and I don't know how to solve this, but this is a culture thing. I got to get fewer lawmakers trying to close records every year because I don't know. I can't do that. You can't do that. But there are literally, when I do a bill list at the first of the year, there are literally, 50, and some of them go nowhere. But we've got to have a culture that is more careful about that. That no, just because we want the Super Bowl here doesn't mean that we make all tourism records confidential, and that's what happened, right? That's what happened this year. If any of you guys were keeping track of that. And I know you have a lot to keep track of, but that is what happened. And it was not good. It was ugly. We were able to get some concessions on that bill, and it passed. It was better. It was better. And Jack Johnson made it better. He made it better. His staff made it better. But it sailed through the House like a Christmas tree that just needed to be, thrown out and put on fire. But it got better, but still the idea that a state agency is not going to be challenged on such a broad exemption that they asked for, that they don't want to negotiate on that, is a problem. And it's something we need to work on. Okay, back to you, Dave, I think.
All right, boy, you're spot on, Deborah. And I'm just going to expand a little bit on what you said, because I think you're exactly right. And there's a lot of research to back you up. Why is this happening? Why are we seeing agencies get away with this stuff? Part of it is the decline in legacy media. There aren't as many journalists out there, one, asking for these records, and then news organizations suing for them. And government folks know that. So as a result, a lot of agencies, not all, but some feel emboldened to game the system and deny people information. There have been a lot of groups that have really fought for this across the country, and they've hit hard times, including NFOIC, but some have just gone out of business. And so there aren't as many groups pushing back that have been in this space. This weak news ecosystem is really dangerous. And one study we just finished shows the states that have the weakest newspapers per capita, weakest press associations, have the greatest secrecy. So we're seeing this in the data that this is causing a lot of these trends, as well as what Deborah said, the statutory erosion. What we see all around the world is when a country or a state passes a law or revamps its law, it's great at first, but then over the years it just gets whittled. Death by a thousand cuts, and that's essentially what's happened at the federal level for decades, and it's happening at the states. To be fair to agencies, a lot of it has to do with technology, digital overload. They just have so much data and information that's digitized. Ironically, it's hard to find the record that you actually want. Keyword searches are not that helpful sometimes, unless you really have an exact record that you want. AI, people are experimenting with that. That's helping, but to be fair to government, it's hard to manage all these electronic files. So what can we do? What can we do about all this? Well, we do as a country, local, state, federal, need to invest in better tech and records management. In fact, Berkeley team just released a report last month that said, focused on the city of Oakland. They said that the city of Oakland would take 4 steps, and they outline exactly what they would do. They'd save $5 million a year, and it would help the public get the information they need. And so it's a great study, and it just shows this helps everybody, including the government agencies. And that's important. We do need these strong laws that Deborah talked about. I put in the chat a study we did where I looked at all the different kinds of provisions and record laws and what actually matters. And the number one thing that matters is this mandatory attorney fee shifting that Deborah talked about. The states that have that have the best compliance. Even more, states that have stiff monetary penalties are even better, like Washington State. So you saw they were the most open of all the states. Well, it's because of this mandatory fee shifting and the fact that if you sue an agency and win, then you get they pay you a penalty up to $100 per day per record that they dinked you around. And so there's these huge payouts in Washington State. A couple months ago, the state patrol had to pay $750,000 in penalties. My alma mater, Western Washington University, just had to pay $111,000 to some journalism students who sued and won. So they got their student loans paid off. I just think word gets around the state like, boy, we got to take this seriously because that's embarrassing, because that's tax dollars. And, that's not ideal use of tax dollars. And so maybe the agencies will think twice. Um, there's a lot, of course, you all know the law probably better than most in the state and the federal. And it's important we understand those nuances, like the fees Deborah was saying. She's absolutely right. The states that allow agencies to charge search and redaction time, it's a killer. They're the worst in the country. It's a way for agencies to just say, oh, that'll be 5,000, make people go away. So I think it's really promising what's happening in Tennessee. So I need to look at the data and see if we're going to start seeing shifts in compliance. I bet we will. There are a whole number of other things. Another two studies showed that strong nonprofit FOI coalitions, the states that have them, tend to have more compliant open government. So thank God you have TCOG, because it's frankly one of the best in the country, even though the state hasn't been the best. The changes you saw, I think, are driven in large part because of TCOG. So they're making improvements. And so the states that have strong coalitions, they matter. They actually affect things. So support Deborah and her work. And she's like one person. So if one person can accomplish that, think about how more people could. Put them in your will. I mean, tithe 10% to TCOG and save Tennessee. That I think is really important. Uh, uh, Three studies I found now shows that jurisdictions that require all government employees to take training on the public records law have better compliance and they're more transparent. There are 4 states that require this in the country. There's also some other countries that require this. So that might be something to think about too. It does actually make a difference. Sunshine Week, we have to get the word out to everybody. All of you on, you are strange people. You care about government and your communities, and unfortunately out there, as well as I do, most people are going about their lives not really paying attention, and that's too bad. And we have to improve civic engagement and engage the public, everybody, to let them know why this matters. And it's hard when you have all sorts of competing interests out there. Everybody has something they're into, and it's hard to compete against puppies and Super Bowls and whatever. So, but we got to do it. And Sunshine Week's a great opportunity. Every March, promote this in Tennessee and get the word out. And there's a website there with lots of ideas for how you might be able to do that. Brechner, we just kind of picked the coordination up of this past year, and it's been a lot of fun. It's cool work. And then of course, support TCOG. And Deborah, would you like to explain a little bit more about what you do? This isn't an infomercial. That's not the idea here.
Yeah, well, I will do a shout out because I saw that Helen Burns Sharp is on this call. Helen is on our board, and she's in that picture there at our 20th anniversary party. And Helen's from Chattanooga and is, one woman whirlwind who has took an interest in some of the TIFs, the tax increment financing deals that were happening in Chattanooga, and built a network there. And I will tell you that, and also pilots, the payment in lieu of taxes. So this is money, and decisions that are made at the city level and at the ECD level, or the local kind of ECD level. And sometimes they choose things that don't seem to fit the definition in state law. Like this doesn't seem like a, you know, a place in Chattanooga that is, dying, that, would qualify under this, you know, statute. And certainly in Nashville, we've seen the same thing. We're pouring money into economic development, but it's like based on laws that if you have a blighted area, and I'm thinking, is there a blighted area in Nashville that we're, but at any rate, I'll just say this to point out, see those people in that picture. You talk about me being a one person show. I'm not. All those people, Helen's on the front row, Adam Yeoman's far left. He's the director of the Associated Press for the South, not just Tennessee. Dorothy Bowles over there from University of Tennessee. Jack McElroy, a former Knoxville News Sentinel. Lots of newspaper editors, some citizen advocates, the Tennessean news directors in there, the Tennessee Association of Broadcasters director. These are, there's, you might notice Hetty Weinberg with ACLU. This is just some of our board. And these are the people that think about these things. And when we need to really get some pressure and some publicity on some issue, this network, and that's what TCOG is, it is a network of people, as you know, that we say, here's something where we need some calls, we need help getting things in the news media, we need publicity, and that can make a difference. And our whole idea is if the public, if citizens know what's going on, they will want to protect access to things. And so that's kind of what we do. So it is, anyway, we're an alliance. And of course, Marionetta, didn't even mention her. She's in the picture there. She's been our treasurer for a long time. And our mission is to promote transparency in Tennessee. And we do that through a lot of different ways. Advocacy is one, education is really our biggest one. I think I kind of went over all of this. We do also, these are just some of our programs. I should mention, we do research. Not every year, like every 3 years, we'll do some kind of, maybe 4 years, we do some kind of research project, but we do have a lot of information on our website. There are programs. I really think that Coalition Builder is an important one down there, trying to keep people connected, including helping people understand what journalists are running into, because a lot of the information we get is really through journalists. And if journalists can't get the information with all the ink to spill, that they have, and all the power that they have, nobody else is going to be getting it either. So you can click, and that's if you want to donate. And I think maybe he's shared these slides. You can use that QR code, which we appreciate any kind of donation. It can be small, but it would support what we're doing, and we would, and we live on. That's what makes us run, our donations.
Excellent. And if you need help on anything, just reach out to us as well. I just put these slides in the chat, so all this information's in there. If you want to download that PowerPoint, here is a PDF, and we're happy to help. I also threw a little thing in there. I thought McElroy did a great job looking at police accountability and transparency. And so I put that in the chat. And I did mention, I know some of you are into election stuff too, and I write for a journalism magazine for investigative reporters, a column on And one column I wrote 4 years ago was how to background candidates, how to use public records to get information about candidates running for office. And I'm going to put that in the chat as well. And then they asked me to write an update. So I just sent that out this week, and I'll put that in the chat as well.
And not
That
tell that
has
David
more
was a
information.
professor and a teacher and helps students and just here's all this information. Isn't he great?
A little overkill, but hey,
No, it's
can't
terrific.
hurt. And I'm not killing any trees, just bytes and digits. And then if you want to talk about vexatious requests, I'm working on a project to figure out how can we deal with those where they're swamping election offices with public records requests. Some of it's people who thought the election was stolen, so they want to find proof through public records, and some of it's other things. But I did a 50-state inventory of how states deal with this, and we're trying to find the best solution so election offices aren't swamped, but and crippled. But at the same time, they don't have solutions that restrict the flow of information that people should have. So that's a goal we have. Come out with a report later this fall, and then in the spring again. With that, I think that we can go to questions and discussion, I think. And I don't know how you want to handle this, but
Sure. If
take it away.
you've answered some questions that have come through the chat, but if anybody has other questions, raise your hand, Debbie.
Yeah,
Yep.
so here's my question, and this will sound familiar to Deborah Fisher. One of the things that came up last year, and she touched on it briefly with this question about the Department of Tourism, is that the original intent of the bill to close access to records, to limit open records requests, actually kind of intersected directly with the administrative rules about how long records needed to be preserved. And I wondered if this is an ongoing issue across the country or if this was just something that popped up here out of nowhere.
To be honest, I don't see that coming up much. I mean, memory's relatively cheap nowadays. So, I mean, holding on to stuff long term really shouldn't be a problem. I mean, we do have to invest in better records management and archival systems, that's for sure. But I don't know, Deborah, do you run across that a lot? Not as
I
much
just
as
think
other
the
issues.
nature of, and this exemption was something that allowed the tourism director to keep confidential for 10 years, anything that the commissioner deems sensitive. And certain kinds of contracts only have to be kept 5 years after the contract begins or after the contract ends. So conceivably, you could have a contract, that could be destroyed under the retention policies of the state before that 10 years were up. And that was one of the changes we got in the bill, that they would at least have to keep the records that they were keeping confidential for those 10 years. And they swore that they wouldn't, trash any of that. But I think, I'm not sure about other states, Debbie. But I do know that if you don't, really, if someone doesn't, the famous story in Tennessee is when Memphis police basically had a big dumpster fire over a lot of records in a big case, related to police. This is years ago. And, if there's something that the easiest way for the public not to be able to see emails or any kind of record is to basically destroy it. And I do think that there is a problem with email records because they're being called transitory records. And we understand that. You and I understand that. Hey, what are you doing for lunch today? Or it's just, there's a lot of email traffic that is not like something that seems like it needs to be retained. But what in Tennessee they do, and I would bet they do it in other states too, is the person who decides whether that record, that email should be retained is the person themselves. There's nobody else. And so if that's going to be the decision maker, the person who has an interest in, say, deleting something, if someone starts asking, then in my view, nothing should be deleted because we have plenty of storage space and just hang on to it. And you've seen lots of stories about where government officials start using these apps where they can trade information that is, secret, and then it disappears. What is it called? I can't think, Dave. The one's just not coming to my mind. But so there's a lot of ways, and I think that's partly because we're used to being able to have a conversation with someone and not everything be recorded. And, maybe there's some, freedom in having that conversation. And so, but so many people are doing things through email and text, and they just fear that there's going to be a paper trail. And especially when there is cronyism involved. And that's what was really, to be honest, that would be what I would be concerned about in terms of the tourism deals that are done. But, and not saying that that's what's going to happen, but that's the type of thing that we'd be looking for, or that we would want to prevent, by making sure that the information is accountable to the public. You can't just do a deal and or do something and it be secret, because then there's no accountability. Sometimes you have to have the threat that, what if the public knew about this? And that kind of keeps people on guard. But I think retention is a bigger problem, but it's not, it's generally doesn't have to do with like big item retention. It has to do with like little items that you can just
Right.
easily get rid of.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. One thing I might add is we've looked at transparency over the decades, and the trend line has been consistent down regardless of who's in charge, what president, what party. So this is a nonpartisan issue. Democrats have been just as secretive, hiding emails and communications as Republicans, and it just gets worse every administration at the federal level. And just came out this story this week about Project 2025. There's guidance on how, if Trump is elected, the government should hide information from the public. And so guidance and video tips on how to hide and be secretive. But it's not just Trump's folks. A lot of journalists have said that Biden is very secretive. Obama was very good at keeping secrets. So it's just, information is power, and those who have it want to keep it, and you want to hoard it, and you want to protect it. And so that's, I think, what we're seeing across the United States, as we have for maybe 30, 40 years at least.
I was wondering if you could both elaborate a little bit more on the reasons for denial, because they're probably pretty interesting.
Go ahead, Deborah. What do you see every
Yeah,
day?
I mean,
People
okay.
calling you.
So I would say that some exemptions to the Public Records Act make sense and should be in the law. I mean, there is definitely, because the definition of a public record in Tennessee is any record created or received by government. So they may receive information, private information of an individual that really should not be public. And so there are lots of times that gets denied. I think the problem denials that we see are ones that are very broad. So for example, this governor's administration, Bill Lee's administration, has taken to a brand new level this deliberative process exemption. And this is not an indictment on Governor Lee's administration in general. I'm just telling you on this, he doesn't want this stuff out. And so there have been, he at the beginning of his first term, asked all of his state agencies, ECD, every single Department of Human Services, all of the agencies, to come up with recommendations to him about how can we improve state services in rural areas. We need to pay attention to rural Tennessee. He ran on that, right? Rural Tennessee is important. And so they came up with these reports, and basically these reports, because a few of them were leaked to the press, we're like, here's what we do, here's what we could do better. This is what we're not doing in some of these rural areas that we really should be doing. Well, there was a public records request for it, and he said, those reports were delivered a process because they were reports from the state agencies to me, and I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet. And he kept those. And what's interesting is that because there were two of them that were leaked to the press, there's nothing in here that's like scary. I mean, maybe he'll do this, maybe he won't. It was really a window into what's not being done in the rural areas that could be done better and how government actually wants to do it better, and he's used that exemption over and over again. The AG in open court, when asked to define what should be covered under deliberative process, said anything that subjects our people to Monday morning quarterbacking. Monday morning quarterbacking was her words, not mine. And it was shocking, but it gives you an idea. She was very, thank you, Janet Kleinfelter, for telling us the truth. I mean, it gives you an idea in terms of kind of the attitude that what they don't want is to be second guessed. It's hard. You're in government. It's hard to be second guessed. They don't want that. But unfortunately, we don't want everything we know about what government is doing to come from a press release from government, right? That's what we don't want. We're the people. We want journalists to access that with the press. And but examples of exemptions, that deliberative process thing, that the state didn't win, but it wasn't a full, Court of Appeals, decision. And that's an example of some of the things that get denied.
Right. And I think we're seeing a lot more denials for privacy issues, often well intended, but often bad effects. We're seeing a lot more control of information, right? Which is a big problem, especially for journalists, that the government's just not even responding to requests. They just ghost people and ignore them. I think it was Louisiana, that police department, where they used to give out copies of police body cam video when people requested a important thing. Well, they're going to start giving out curated videos, which means they're editing how they want and providing their explanation. It's almost like the government's newscast. Instead of the raw video and images, they're helping you understand it from their perspective. And you could see where that would go down a slippery slope, where the information that you get from the government is curated, and you don't see it for what it is in its whole truth. And to me, that's a little scary if that becomes acceptable everywhere.
Thank you. First of all, this is a fantastic presentation, and we often find that our reaction is, oh my goodness, I've learned so much. I don't know if I have questions because I've such a good download. We really appreciate that. Anyone else have questions? Now's the time. All right.
Now is the time, but you can always email me too.
Of course, of course. Well, I would like everyone to just thank our guests, either with your applause, waves, however you'd like to express it. We really, really, really appreciate Dr. Collier and Deborah Fisher spending time with us at the League of Women Voters. And I thank all of you for attending. We'll have another webinar next month on book banning, and that'll be posted if you haven't seen it already. Thank you, everyone. And if I'm going to stop the recording now.